Arlington, Virginia is consistently ranked as one of the top places in the United States to live. In this video though, I'm going to be going over the 5 worst things about living in Arlington County. And I'm an Arlington resident and also a real estate agent, and I've lived here for a very long time. Number 1. The housing prices here are pretty high. So the median sales price for a single family house is about 1.2. For a townhouse, it's about 900,000, and for a condo, it's 500K. Now, I know that sounds pretty high, but obviously, if you know how median prices work, you can buy a single family house for much less than 1.2. Usually, between 8 and 900K range, you can still get, a house. Once you're in the 700K range for a single family house, it's more you're just buying the lot to develop. And to put this in a little bit of perspective, so Arlington is not as expensive, obviously, as San Francisco or Los Angeles or New York City. Those cities are more or less ranked in like the top 5 for most expensive places to live. Arlington is ranked in the top 15 nationwide for most expensive housing. So it's not insanely expensive, but it's definitely pricier. I was listening to a podcast where a guy was talking about, he's like, if you live in Los Angeles, you need $50 million to live comfortably. If you have $49 million, you will not live comfortably. The prices in California are just outrageous, insane. And it's also, you got to keep things in perspective. So if you're purchasing a property, ideally you should be holding on to it for like a minimum of 5 years, much less like 10 years or even longer than that. And I don't know if there's ever been a time in history where people thought prices were low. I was talking to someone who had the opportunity to purchase a property in Bethesda for like $80,000. This was like in the 1980s. And Bethesda's kind of similar in price point to Arlington, but on the Maryland side. So in the 1980s, or maybe it was the 70s, he could have purchased this property for $80,000. It was just like a simple like brick house in Bethesda. And he was like, no, that's way too expensive. Who would ever pay $80,000 for a single family house in Bethesda? It's not even fixed up or anything like that. However, nowadays, if you were to sell that property or even just the land, even if there wasn't even a house there, it'd probably be worth about 10 to 20 times what he was paying, 20, 30 years ago. So in my opinion, at least the real estate agent in me, but also I'm an investor as well. Prices always seem high at the time, but if you're purchasing in an area that's super convenient like Arlington and just has a ton of jobs and is on a ton of different rankings nationwide, great school districts, things like that, it's going to attract more people, it's going to attract more development, and over time, you should see your asset appreciate. But one thing I like about Arlington County is that there is a variety of housing options. So yes, you have a lot of the newer construction, which might sell for like $2 million, even $3 million, but then you also have a lot of the older houses. So if you're okay living in a smaller, older property, you don't have to pay $1 million. And as far as condos and things like that, 500K is a median price for all condos of all sizes. If you're just looking for a 1-bedroom condo, you're going to be paying significantly less than that. And it also obviously depends on what part of Arlington you purchase in. So obviously if you're buying in like around Clarendon or Ballston or Roslyn or a lot of neighborhoods in North Arlington, you're going to be paying a premium. However, there's also neighborhoods in South Arlington, which is still very close by. You still have access to all the Arlington amenities. And depending on the neighborhood, you'll be paying significantly less. So maybe the house might need a little bit of work, but there's a lot of options. If you look throughout Arlington, there's going to be a variety of neighborhoods and housing prices. Next up, we have the parking, traffic, towing, and police. So Arlington, as far as parking goes, you do need to be careful because there's a lot of people, I guess, that work for the county or, that check the meters, and they will give you a ticket. Everyone that's lived in Arlington can tell you a story of, hey, I was only gone in the store for 5 minutes and had a parking ticket, on my windshield. So all you have to do really is just download the Park mobile app. It's very simple, and then you can pretty much park anywhere in Arlington. And there's a lot of places in Arlington where you don't need that app. But if you're on like Wilson Boulevard or, Clarendon, Ballston, Roslyn, around those areas, you should make sure to pay your parking tickets. I would say though that the parking in Arlington is going to be better than in DC. Like if you want some perspective, if you feel bad about the parking situation in Arlington, go into DC and drive around for an hour or two and try to park. Because the signs in DC and all the congestion, it's much more stressful to park in DC. You'll pull up to a parking spot and there'll be like 4 or 5 different signs telling you like very specific times, but sometimes they're contradictory and it's just like, can you park there? Can you not park there? And then you'll pay and then you'll still get a ticket. So Arlington is much more clear about the times and zones and things like that. Next up, and this is kind of related to parking, is the police presence. So Arlington has a ton of police presence. I think it's one of the highest in the nation. Since Arlington's actually a pretty small county, we have a huge police force, which is good because they keep things safe. However, you never want to speed in Arlington. If you're speeding in Arlington, even if you're like 12 miles over the speed limit, an Arlington police officer will catch you. And this also applies to stop signs. So obviously you should never go speeding through any stop signs. But if you don't come to like a 110% stop, like stop and then wait 3 seconds and then go through the stop sign. Because I know I've gotten tickets, I know other people have gotten tickets that were like, we literally stopped at the stop sign. We saw you and we stopped. But if you don't come to a complete stop, the Arlington police officer might get you. We also have a lot of towing that goes on in Arlington. And again, this is more around, you know, the most popular neighborhoods where there's a lot of restaurants, nightlife, things like that, like Clarendon, Ballston, Roslyn, even Shirlington. Do not park in a potential area that is not for that restaurant or specifically for that store. There's actually, if you look up Arlington towing, like lawsuits and things like that, there was actually like a company that I think was like doing some predatory towing. And I can tell you, anyone that's lived in Arlington for like 5 or 10 years has probably been towed, you know, including myself. And a long time ago, I actually used to work with a guy who, like, his part-time job is he would sit in like an SUV with like tinted windows. This was in Clarendon. And anytime somebody parked illegally, even if they were just like running into a store, he would call the tow truck company. I think he would get like commission every time somebody was towed for, you know, parking in the wrong space. So they are very quick in Arlington. So do not test the tow truck companies here. Let's also talk about the traffic here. So, you know, being in Arlington right next to Washington, D.C., you know, you're going to have congestion and traffic and things like that. However, I would say Arlington, as far as Northern Virginia goes, or maybe even the entire DMV, Arlington might be the best. Like, because you're in a city, you're going to have bad traffic. So that's just something you're going to have to deal with. But Arlington has so many different, like, access points to D.C., to Maryland, so many different highways and, you know, ways you can go. So, you know, if you're living in like Woodbridge or Manassas or Centerville, that is going to be a really tough commute if you're going into D.C. or different places. That's going to be like 45 minutes easily each way. When you're in Arlington, you can get creative with routes and you're just going to be much closer to everything. And traffic's going to be bad, but not as bad as it could be. The next worst thing about living in Arlington, and I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here because it's kind of hard to come up with a list, but is the jet noise. So DCA Airport is located in Arlington, and a lot of times the planes will come right down the Potomac. Well, that's obviously the main place they come down. Actually, you can hear a plane right now. And I don't think that was a commercial plane. I think that was more of like a military jet or something like that. But I live in Roslyn, so I hear all different kinds of planes and, you know, helicopters and things going on. And you will get that. And to me, it's not extremely disruptive. It's more or less like kind of blends in with like the urban like noise of the city. But, you know, if you're really sensitive to airplanes, then, you know, you should probably not buy a house right on the Potomac. And it's just something to be aware of, because I'm pretty sure in every city you probably have some airplane noise. And myself personally, I don't mind it too much. I had a friend that lived in Old Town Alexandria, right on the water, right where the planes basically took off, because that's over by DCA Airport. And we would just sit on his balcony. He lived there for 5 years and the noise wasn't much of an issue. People actually loved that condo and loved that view. But we would just basically sit on his balcony, drink a beer, play some music, and kind of watch the planes take off. So it was kind of relaxing. So it's kind of just something you get used to. And, you know, to compare it to, like, let's say Washington, D.C., like if you're in Washington, D.C. and you live right on New York Avenue or like Georgia Avenue or one of the main like roads or busy parts of D.C., if you just sit there for like 5 minutes, you will hear sirens, ambulances. It's just like sounds like chaos a lot of times when you're in DC. Versus Arlington, it's more or less it's much more toned down. You don't have all these horns and sirens going on and people yelling and stuff like that. It's more just like kind of like blends into the, you know, the background of the city. The next worst thing about Arlington, Virginia is the lot sizes. So for single family houses, your lot sizes are going to be a little bit smaller. The new builders, when they're building these properties, they'll oftentimes build a massive house, but you're not going to have much of a yard. You know, with Arlington, you're really paying for convenience. You can walk everywhere. It's, you know, great neighborhoods, restaurants, stores, shops, parks, everything like that. But if you want like 5 acres on a scenic lot, there's actually a neighborhood for that, Clifton, Virginia. It's about 45 minutes outside of Arlington. Great neighborhood, and that's where you'll get your 5 acres. And there's parts of Annandale and Alexandria where you can get more of like at least a half acre and some more space. The lot sizes in Arlington, you know, might be around, you know, a tenth of an acre, you know, sometimes bigger, sometimes smaller, just kind of depends which neighborhood you're looking at. But that being said, even if you have a smaller lot, you know, the way the house is built and the way it's constructed, sometimes even a smaller lot, you can still have a big yard. So it really also depends on just like the layout of the house and that type of thing. Because I've seen some really nice yards that, they were smaller, but it worked for the house. And because Arlington has one of the top rated park systems in the United States, I think it kind of makes up for it a bit. I think there was a stat I read that 99% of Arlington residents are within a 10-minute walk of a park. So you can utilize the public parks and you don't have to worry about mowing your grass too much if you have that small lot. The next worst thing about Arlington, Virginia, and this is a pro depending on who you ask, a con for maybe people that have lived there for 30 or 40 years, but there's a ton of development and new construction going up in Arlington in terms of residential, big brand new houses, as well as like on the commercial side, lots of high rises going up and more development happening. So in the 80s and 90s, Arlington was more or less like a sleepy suburb, and now we have builders coming in building like $2.5 million houses on some of these lots. And so some of the residents that have lived here for a while aren't too thrilled sometimes when they see some mega mansion. Now in my opinion, because I work with some developers, some of these houses are really nice. Like they don't really fit in with the neighborhood because you're building some super modern or like brand new craftsman style house, but they're more custom. They're not like these cookie cutter houses. Like if you go further outside of Arlington, 30, 45 minutes, you see a lot, like every house looks exactly the same. At least in Arlington, it's more of like a custom, luxury type of house. And yeah, it's causing the prices to go up, but every neighborhood that pretty much happens. So, what are you going to do? There was also a pretty controversial zoning law passed in Arlington, which basically allows developers to build up to a 6-unit property in areas that were, zoned for single family housing. So there are some restrictions, like I think there's only about 57 permits per year, and you can't build a 6-unit on every single lot. There's also like size requirements for the lot and that type of thing. But obviously a lot of people aren't too happy about that. The developers are pretty happy, but a lot of people that have owned in Arlington for a while might not be too happy about an apartment building going up nearby. And that zoning law is called the missing middle. It's already been passed in several other cities, I think Milwaukee and Portland and a few other towns. And it didn't really have like a drastic, it wasn't like all of a sudden there's like tons and dozens and dozens and dozens of new multifamily buildings. It's kind of more of like a gradual effect. Every year there's going to be, 20 to 30 to 40, new duplexes or triplexes, that type of thing. So it's not like it's completely changing every single neighborhood, but, over time, who knows? That being said, Arlington is a great place to live. You're so convenient to everything, to shopping, restaurants, Washington, D.C., airports. So if you're interested in buying or selling in Arlington or the DMV area, shoot me a text at this number or give me a phone call. I'd love to help out. See you on the next one. Bye.